Okay, so we're going to make this really interactive. So let's go for this. Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for all of you that have just joined me. I'm Sharon Lovegrove, and I'm an author, an evolutionary midwife, and mental fitness coach. And I help women who are stressed, overwhelmed, depleted, fearful they'll be found out, to not be perfect, reclaim their life back, and to walk their path with power, purpose, and grace. So today, what we're going to do is to really talk about how to activate yourself and be creative in motivating. So many of you will know I talk about energy, and many of you will know that I've talked about energy just being pure energy. We are pure energy. We are not solid beings. But the problem is that we live the lie in every essence, believing that we are solid, okay? And this results in us compounding and compacting and contracting to fit to that model. Of course, we don't do this consciously, but our thoughts, every thought that we experience becomes a thing. And the reason for this is before the thought even exists, it's in potentiality, right? So from a quantum perspective, everything sits in potential, in multiple potentialities, right? It sits there in this landscape, in this field of multiple potentialities, which stay there until a thought is thunk, right? Until a decision, so until a collapse of the waveform happens. Until that happens, a thought doesn't happen. So if there are no ears to hear, is there really a sound? If you go into a vacuum, you won't hear sound, because a vacuum means there is no frequency, there's no resonance, there's no movement of anything, and so therefore there can be no sound. But there's also the technicality. If a tree comes down in a wood in a forest, does it make a noise? If there's no ears to hear it, no, it can't make a noise, because the noise can only be heard by something that can hear it. Otherwise, it doesn't make a noise. Yeah. So the potential for things to collapse, they have to have something that's receptive to hearing it or receptive to receiving it. So yeah, this whole part of what we're talking about is how to activate yourself and become creative and self-motivating is all about this idea in the quantum sciences. It's all about activating yourself so that you can know how to do it. But the truth is, unless you are committed to a desire that pulls you forward, you will always be caught in the flow of the opposite direction, of something that is pulling you back to what you don't want rather than what you do want. So this is really the key, isn't it? The key is when we want to activate, we need to overcome oppositional forces. And this is really important. So Joe Dispenza says that we need an intention with an elevated emotion so that we can catalyze forward, so that we can move our neurons in the direction, neurons that fire together, wire together. We can be catalyzed forward without any effort. Well, marginal effort, some effort. But the thing is, how we perceive it wouldn't be effort. So we can probably say it is an effort. And then Abraham Hicks says you must stay in the vortex. So when you notice that you have this intention, you have this desire, and you decide to match your energy to get that desire, that is the vortex. That is the vortex. And you have to match that energy and stay in that energy until you get there. And the thing is, once you're there, you find you have another desire and you move higher into the next frequency and to the next vortex. And there are multiple universes, universes and multiple vortexes. So the only reason that your desire is there is for you to see the contrast. That's all. That's its job, to let you see the contrast so that it tells you to raise the frequency so that you can match the energy so that it can materialize. It's simple, and yet we don't do it. We don't do it. And why is that? Why don't we do it when we know what we have to do? It's kind of like, why don't we, for example, make sure we eat well when we know that eating helps us? Yeah. Well, how do we create the energy? So we know that energy kind of comes from our food, comes from sleeping well, from resting well, from exercising well, building all of those kinds of things. And these are things we can see, and these are things that we know affect our performance. Particularly when we notice something's lacking, we'll go, oh, did you sleep well last night? Did you have enough rest? Did you have enough food? Yeah. You know, when you walk across the street and you go, ooh, and you go, oh, I need some energy. Okay. So this is where we can recognize straight away something's lacking. And I'm not going to lie, because, you know, we are a body and a brain. Our brain and our body, our brain exists in our body. But we need these things to live, but we don't live in a world anymore where we don't have language, right? So our thoughts are pivotal here. What often happens is that we live in the lie that our brain is outside our body and it's got nothing to do with our body. And so we don't necessarily take care of our brain. So this is where we sit in that paradigm where we have this issue. And ordinarily, when we're younger, when we're okay, and when everything's going swimmingly well, we have all our ability to do things. But as we get older, we struggle, because now we are kind of even more disconnected from where we were before. But the thing is, as I said, we are a brain that lives in a body, and we evolved out of a world where, hey, we didn't need the kind of brain that we have right now. Now, all we needed to know was where the food was, where the opportunity was, where we would be safe, where we could procreate, where we could do all those things. And we didn't need language. Most of the animals get away with not having any language at all. But we did develop language. We did develop language. And we are born now in a world where we need our brain in a different way to what we were initially created for. We kind of jumped. We did this discontinuous jump where we moved into a creative being. Yeah. And so we ended up needing to have more complex needs. And that meant that we needed a more complex brain. Well, does the brain come first, or the complexity of everything else? I think it grew together, and one helped the other. But the thing is, the brain uses a lot of energy. 30% of your intake goes to your brain. Maybe sometimes when you're studying, 40% or 50% when you're learning an onerous task. So you recruit from one area of the body in order for your brain to have it. And your brain uses it. It gulps it up. But the problem is we really pay attention to how to manage our brain, how to understand our brain. And why is that? Why is that? Well, the reason is that for the most We can put two and two together. I can say, well, this is my coffee cup and it'll give me coffee and it will give me energy, because if I haven't put sugar in there, but if I had put sugar in there and I was feeling a bit woozy, then guess what? I would say, oh God, that'll give me a little bit of an energy hit, and we can get addicted to that. But we often can't see our thoughts, right? We can't see our thoughts. And so we can't always make sense that actually it's our thought that is the problem, right? Which means that we don't put our thoughts under scrutiny. We don't pay attention to our thoughts, yeah? And we then don't think about that this is probably the most pivotal thing that we have to do in our life. Manage our thoughts, manage the way our thoughts direct us. So I'm giving you the evidence as to why our mind does that thing. Our mind is blind because we can't see. And our mind looks at our mind, and our mind is smart, and it can hide truths from us. And it can tell us we're okay when we're not, right? All those things we need, we don't. So we end up in a really difficult, challenging situation. So I wonder, did you know that meditation, acts of intentional action, actually cleanse our brain? It cleanses our brain of all the debris and byproducts of our metabolism. And it also decreases inflammation. There is a very special pump that actually, when we go into this default network, this very special pump literally goes around, and there's certain very special cells, glial cells, that actually go around and they chomp away. They chomp away at all the debris. And then there's fluid that comes in and washes stuff away, right? So inflammation goes down with meditation. That's why meditation is so helpful. There's this special pump. And especially, we know that when we sleep, we also go into this default network. And this default network is the same as deep meditation. So you sleep, you meditate, you can get the same amount of cleaning happen in your meditation. So what is so important is that our brain gets the rest that it needs to nourish and to replenish itself. And when we meditate, we do that, but we also do something else. Because when we sleep, we do some cleaning, and that's very good. But when we meditate, we do something else. What we do is we start developing the muscles that give us mental strength. It helps us to be activated. It helps us to become more motivated. It helps us to become clear on our desires. Because when we meditate, we quieten down and we begin to listen to our inner being. And we start to connect to our purpose that is unique for us, that drives us. And we connect to that purpose. And when we do that, it sets us on fire. It ignites us. It energizes us. It starts to propel us forward. But that fire won't continually get caught and take a rampage. And, while we have this counteractive negative thinking, which is caused by our internal judge, right? And this is why we need those constant activations throughout the day to keep us in line. So these activations are the energetic forces that make us feel possibility. And this rouses us, just wakes us up to commit to moving forward. So I've talked about these, these activations. How do we do that? How do we do these activations? How do we build these mental muscles? And why do we need to do them? What is it that is the mechanism that sits underneath it? Well, excuse me. We need to fire our neurons in the direction of what it is that we want, so that we can wire them together and create neural pathways that are easy to follow. And in doing so, we activate all the principles of brain plasticity. What we do is we increase our pathway, we increase the energy, we increase the connections, we increase the hormones that all galvanize us in that direction of flow, which means that electricity just flows and flows and flows and flows, and it builds more and more and more. And the paradox, or the opposite of that, is areas that don't get energy, there's no firing, the brain doesn't pay attention to, so there's no rewiring, and so it gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And this is what's so important, because when we have more going in one direction, we develop a pattern, and that becomes the norm, right? That becomes the new state of being. That becomes the new us, yeah? And of course, if we ignore or we stop that cruel voice, or we get in the way and we interrupt it, then that gets weaker, yeah? You walk on a road, you drive on it, you create a highway. Well, it doesn't disappear very fast, but it certainly disappears fast if you're not attending to it, because nature, guess what? Have you ever left a garden, you've weeded it, and then all of a sudden, you leave it for a few days, and God Almighty, there's a few more weeds coming up, all right? The same thing happens in our brain. Weeds grow in those old places, and we get a nice clean path for the things we want. So we grow those pathways by purposeful activations that we do regularly with intensity and with enough time so that they can fuse together, all right? Fuse together. And this is what I call ICAs or PQs. ICAs are intentional committed actions that we do with intensity long enough, for a long enough duration, that you can wire this up. You can wire and get a greater effect. So this is what we have. We have, the brain likes to change. It prefers to stay the same, but it is even more excited to change. We just got to activate that by opening up that space that lets our brain notice that we're not doing the same old thing, that we've made a commitment to doing this. So to go back to Joe Dispenza, in order to begin to activate yourself so you can create and self-motivate, you have to have an intention, a conscious act, right? A conscious act where you can take action, a conscious direction that you can take, something that you can desire. And the next one is you have to have that emotion. You have to connect with it. You have to connect and commit to it. You have to feel the energy of that. You have to feel the desire, and it needs to be worthwhile. Yeah, it needs to be worthwhile. Otherwise, you won't take it. You won't take it. So it doesn't matter what anyone does. If you have a stick and you have a carrot, which one are you likely to go for? Well, let's just change it for a chocolate rather than a carrot. Okay, I know many of us won't go for carrots, but there are some of us that do. I prefer carrots. But if there's a carrot, yeah, or a chocolate, you're going to go for that. You want to go for that. You don't want to go for getting hurt. Yeah. So we want to create more carrots and less sticks. Yeah. Because when we're in sticks, we're in sabotage energy. We are in the energy that pulls us back. It keeps pulling us. We'll get things done. We'll get things done, but we won't enjoy it. And we'll feel tired and we'll feel stressed. So it's really important to go for something that you love. Something that you love. And think about it every day as something that you love. So if you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth, you go, oh, I love brushing my teeth. That's good. Or you think about your phone and you think, oh, man, this is a nice phone. I love my phone. And that helps you. Anything that you can think about that creates that feeling of love and joy and flow, that's where you go. That's where you go. And that is then the bit that Abraham Hicks talks about, the vortex. You have to be in the vortex. You need to stay in the flow. You need to be happy every given moment and only go with what makes you happy. All right? What makes you happy, what makes you expand, what makes you grow. All right? So your job is to stay in the process. It's not to look at, oh God, I haven't got there yet. It's just about knowing that it is given. It is there for you. And you just have to be happy in the flow. Happy in the flow to know that your job is done. So now you're asking, how do I do that? Well, I think the key is you first have to explore what you'd like to do. What is it that brings you onto this earth? Yeah? What is it that makes your heart sing every day of your life? And you have to find that. You have to turn around and look for that that's there. And it may not always be what you think it is, right? Some people find that they're quite happy being a mother looking after their children, and they genuinely are. And there's some mothers that are not like that. They want to do more. But everybody has their unique purpose, the unique purpose in how they contribute. And so it really is useful to look at what you really love, what sets you alight. So if you like cooking, damn well find a way that you can do cooking that will feed you. Or you, if you're like me, I love neuroscience. I can't stop looking at what goes on in the brain, right? I love neuroscience. So for me, I like to know the how and the why things work. Now, I may not know, and you may not understand that in neuroscience, we don't always, part of the MRI is not actually telling you what is happening in the brain. It's just showing you that blood is flowing to an area. So it doesn't give us cause, but it does give us possibility. And so I like to kind of explore those things and think, well, what would change that? And get curious, what might change that? And would that be a research to do? Yeah. And it's just really making those connections, which is what I am incredibly good at and what I love. I love to make those connections when someone says something and I ask a question. I think, I like that. And that gives me purpose. That gives me a way of looking at the world that is so good for me. And it excites me. And I want to do more of that. And that's when you're in the vortex. But the thing is, when you get excited, and that gets the juices rolling, this is when we are in our greatest essence, our greatest feminine essence. Because our greatest feminine essence, that sense of excitement and possibility, takes us into that space of our brain that tells us we are bigger than who we think we are. We are bigger, so much bigger. There is you that is the small bit, and there's this you that is so big, yeah, that is connected to the all that is. And that you is the part of you that's connected to the divine feminine. That's the part of you that is connected in all that way. And that has particular areas we know light up in the brain that tell us, yes, this is where you are. So that's when we're connected to our highest power. But we can't live in that state all the time. We have to create. And by action, creating means, we've got to have structure. We have to have structure in order to birth something in, right? And that requires the other part of our brain, requires the part of our brain that's really good at doing little piece by piece serialization, doing checking and planning and cutting away and looking at things from a curious point of view, that kind of part of the brain. Yeah, that's the part that we need. Of course, that part mustn't be rigid, must be in service to the dream. Yeah, always in service to the dream. But we need it. We absolutely need it. And then there's the growing and the manifesting. And a little while ago, it's really interesting. And I don't know why the story's now coming up for me, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Right at the beginning of COVID time, when the pandemic started, I had a plant that came from South Africa. I brought it. And I'd kind of planted it, and it was growing, and that was okay. And then it died. Well, I thought it died. And I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to just take care of this plant. I can't see right now. It looks dead to me. And I posted on Facebook because it actually did look dead. And I thought, you know what? I know that plants have the ability that even if there's one cell in that plant, it can totally regenerate. Well, it did. It did. And now it's a flourishing plant. So there is something about, and for a long time, I didn't even know. I kept looking and I kept thinking, how much water should I give it? How much light should I give it? I talked to it. I did all sorts of things. And it still took a long time before I saw the first shoot. And I'm going to say it was about 4 months before I saw it. And I was amazed. I was amazed. And then I was like a pregnant mom, kind of, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Is it going to be okay? All of these things. And now I take care of the plant. And I can see that it really is about staying with that plant, nurturing that plant, being excited for that plant, waiting for that plant. It hasn't yet flowered. I'm going to tell you that. But I'm so excited because it's there and it's doing its thing. And I made it happen because I took time to let it grow. So this is what it's all about. It's about how do we activate? How do we put hope in there? How do we look at things differently? What do we need to know? So for example, if you need to find out how you can do something, if you think, I really would like to do this, then just start with curiosity. What would it look like if I had it? Where might I go for those resources? How might I be in order that I can accumulate those things? Yeah. And then just take one step at a time and stay in the vortex. Stay in the vortex so that things start to connect. And this is the way that we activate. When we activate because we've meditated and we've stayed with that intention. And staying with that intention fires our neurons to wire so that that wise part of ourself, our sovereign, can come through. So if anything here has resonated with you, then please contact me and we can have a conversation on how I can support you. I've left a link in the comments so you can book in, and I'd love to help you. It's my purpose. So I'll say goodbye, but first I want to thank you for being with me and listening to me today. And, if you come onto the replay, please put your comments in so that I can respond. Much love and have a lovely, lovely weekend. Bye-bye.